Hi everyone, we are ready to go live. Hi, this is Ramanuj here from Resigo. Today we have our guest Priyasha with us. Priyasha has been on our platform quite a few times before, and she is somebody who has many years of experience. She was my senior at Trilegal when I was working there back in 2011-12, and she has after that she has worked in several law firms in India and abroad in Dubai specifically, and she's founder of her own startup working on training people to clear qualifying exams in UK to practice there as foreign lawyers, as well as she's working with Resigo, which is a company which builds interesting softwares around uh, how to make your CV more polished and everything. So we have Priyasha today to help us with all those things. So welcome Priyasha, thank you for joining us. And a request to everybody that please introduce yourselves in the chat. Tell us who you are, where are you logging in from, and what are your expectations from today's session. All right, please. All right. So quickly, please, yeah, just introduce yourself. Sonal, thank you very much. We can see your name, but if you can also tell us where are you logging from, what do you do, that'll be great. I'll also start a poll, uh, getting a little bit of, asking you a few questions. You respond to them when you launch them. All right, Priyasha, why don't you get started? Oh, yes, please.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, thank you so much, Ramanuj, for your introduction. And I'm really glad to be back again at Resigo and excited to be helping all of you with your law resumes, as well as taking you through an interactive session where we actually build your resumes. Um, Great. So I'm wondering whether, should we wait for a few minutes or should we get started, Ramanuj?
We can get started, yeah. People will,
Okay,
I
perfect.
understand, will join in over a period of time.
Over a period of time. Okay, perfect. I'm just going to do that then. Ramanuj, if you can allow me to share my screen.
Yep.
Perfect. Great. All right. So hello, everyone, again. And today I'm presenting on behalf of Resigo, and I'm very excited to be able to help you build your law resume on the go. So just a little bit about Resigo. We've recently launched a resume builder exclusively for law students and lawyers. One of the things that we noticed is that a lot of lawyers as well as law students were using various different formats of CVs, and a lot of them were also confused about how to draft their CVs. And so we decided to solve this problem using the intervention of technology, and then that's how Resigo was born. So the best part about Resigo is that this is exclusively for lawyers, and so we've made sure that we've tailored it to suit the Indian law students and legal fraternity. So just, today's session is going to be quite interactive. So what I'm going to request you to do is to log on to this website called menti.com, which is, I'm going to put it on the chat. And once you log on to the website, then you can just click on this code and then you can enter the code. Because I'm going to be asking you a lot of questions, and this is going to allow me to share your views as well, to hear more from you. So I'm going to give you a few seconds. So log on to menti.com and then you can just press the code. And if you've actually logged on, then just click on the heart button so that I know all of you are with me. You'll have to use your, I think your phones to log on to menti.com. Okay, that's good. I can see a few. Perfect. Yeah, the idea is just to make sure that all of you are with me. I'm going to be asking a lot of questions so you can actually answer them via your smartphones. Okay, perfect. So I'm anyways going to move on, and I'm sure in due course, a lot of you would join the website. I mean, join this link. Perfect. A little bit about myself. I mean, Ramanuj has already introduced me, but I'm just going to quickly go over this. I graduated out of NLU Jodhpur. After that, I worked at Trilegal Mumbai for about 5 years, and that's where I interacted with Ramanuj, and we also worked on a couple of matters together. After that, I moved to Dubai, and I've been working for, I was working for a law firm for about 4.5 years, and now I've set up my own firm. Right now, I have an interest in technology, and that's where I collaborated with Resigo, and we sort of built an automated resume builder. We're aiming to be the best in the world, especially, and we're focused on just lawyers. So we're quite excited to be the only resume builder in the legal space. I'm also the founder of an app called QLTS, and this is for those lawyers who want to qualify as a solicitor in the UK. Yeah, so we're actually going to be building various features into Resigo. So I would, the best way to keep updated is to follow us on social media. We're particularly active on LinkedIn, Instagram as well. So please do follow us. Great, so let's quickly go over today's agenda. We're going to be discussing what makes a good resume. I'm going to be covering a few resume writing tips, but most of it I'm going to be covering as we build our resumes together along with all of you. Another thing that we're going to be covering is how to defeat a bot. More on this during the presentation, because there's a lot that even I've learned recently, so I'm very excited to be sharing that with you. What employers are looking for, grabbing a job, internship, certain useful resources, and then, of course, the best part of today, which is building your resume. So again, just so that, I want this to be an interactive session. So if all of you can just, answer this question on your phones in terms of which year of law school you're in. So then that gives me an idea. So those of you who've just joined, I would say go to log on to this website, menti.com, and use the code. And then you can participate in all the polls and questions that I'm asking you as we go along today's presentation. Great. So we have a lot of fifth-year students, which is good because a lot of you would be applying for jobs and internships. Great. Perfect. I need to see some more numbers, guys. So if you haven't logged in, then please do log on to the website and enter your code. Okay, anyways, I think it's good to know that there are so many of you who are in the fifth year as well as the second year. So I'm going to show you a few CVs right now, and I'm going to show you CVs from Harvard Law School, and these are recommended CVs. So recommended CVs from Harvard Law School, Stanford Law School, as well as Yale Law School. And what I want you to do is, I just want you to make 2 quick observations about these CVs. Now, if you look into your laptop screens, the CVs are not super clear, but all I want you to do is have a look at the overall look and feel of the CV and make two observations in your head. So this is a Harvard Law School recommended resume. You're probably not going to be able to read it on your laptop because I know it's quite small, but I just want you to make a few quick observations. So this is a Harvard Law School resume. This is a Yale Law School recommended resume. Here again, just make a few quick observations.
Will you tell us the differences later on?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's not so much in terms of the differences is not a big deal, but the key idea is just to see how these resumes are structured and how they're different from how we would draft a resume. This is a Stanford Law School recommended resume.
Right. Okay.
Great. So what I want you to do is I want you to make a few observations on these resumes. So if you can again go to your smartphones and just enter 2 words, what comes to your mind when you have a look at these resumes. So if you've logged on to menti.com, then you can actually click some words onto your resume. So for example, I would, okay, Chris, professional, these are good observations. Good, fabulous, yes. Experience centric, that's a very good observation because that's the most important criteria that an employer is looking for. It was, yeah, I mean, I can understand it wasn't clear, but I just wanted to make, you to make a few quick observations. It's formal, that's true. Detailed internship work, very, very valid observation. Eye-catching, yes. The funny thing is that it was so simple and it didn't have any fancy designs, and yet it was eye-catching. Great publications, experiences, education, yes. Every law student's resume must focus on education and experiences. That's very important. Transparent, yes. Detailed, concise. Yeah, I think concise and crisp are very important observations, and also simple. I think simple is what a lot of us tend to forget when we create resumes these days, because we sort of assume that we need to make something very fancy to catch people's attention. But that's actually not the case. Employers are looking for something very simple. Great. So these are very valid observations. And as I go along with my presentation, I'm going to just touch upon these CVs, and I'm going to discuss what makes these CVs stand out, and why we should perhaps follow a similar model for ourselves as well. Great. Thank you so much for your participation, all of you. Great. So I'm going to quickly cover a few resume writing tips. As I mentioned, I'm going to be covering all of this in detail as we build our resumes together. But a few quick points before we get there. One is your resume is your sales tool. So it's very important to sell ourselves when we are applying for a position. It's not easy. A lot of us find it quite difficult to do that. But your resume's job is to land you an interview at your employer, your prospective employer. Not just that, your resume is actually it's what gives it's the document that gives a first impression of yourself. So you need to make sure that you're doing a very good job there. Another point is that the reader of your resume, they're not going to spend more than 30 seconds reviewing your CV. So even if you look at the CVs that you just saw, which was the 3 CVs from Harvard, Stanford, and Yale, you could actually make those observations even though you've only had a look at those CVs in like, a few seconds. So collectively, you probably would have spent 30 seconds looking at those 3 CVs, yet you were able to make some very strong observations about those CVs. So that just goes to show that, your employer or the reader of your resume is going to be doing the same, which is they're going to actually just spend 10 seconds judging your resume. They'll have a quick scan through of your resume, and within 30 seconds, they will decide whether they want to proceed with your application or not. So if in those 30 seconds, you're not catching their attention, you're most likely going to lose your chance of getting through the door. Another very important point that a lot of us tend to forget is that we tend to make a very standard CV, and we use that CV for all positions. Now, that's a very wrong approach. It's very important to have different versions of your CVs and to tailor each of your CV for the position that you're applying for. So for example, if you're applying to a corporate law firm and you want to join the corporate team, you would focus on all your experiences which are relevant for the corporate law firm. So for example, you would focus on using words like shareholder agreement, share purchase agreement. You would use words like mergers and acquisitions, joint ventures, and that's what your CV is going to be focused on. On the other hand, if you were applying to a nonprofit, you're not going to be using words like M&A, joint ventures. You would have to tone those down, and you would have to tailor your CV accordingly when you apply to a nonprofit. And again, if you're applying to a judge, then you would focus a little bit on your CV. You would focus a little bit on your litigation experience. There was a question there that I just missed, but I think the question was about CVs on Canva. I'm going to cover that. That's a very good question. Anyways, I'm going to move on right now, and then I'll address those questions when I'm actually building the CV. Your CV needs to provide a very good description in terms, especially when it comes to your work experience and the projects that you've worked on. So this ties in with what I just mentioned. If you're applying to a corporate law firm, you need to make sure that all your corporate experiences, you've actually included a very good description in your work experience. And we're going to actually cover that as we build your CV. And then, of course, this point is like a catch-all point. But if you look at if you again recall and think about all those CVs that you just saw, which is from Harvard, Yale, and Stanford, they're all concise, they're accurate, they're error-free, they're well-organized, clear, easy to read, and visually pleasing. In fact, these observations were already made by all of you when you just saw those CVs in 30 seconds. And then, of course, the last point is your resume should beat the ATS. Now, how many of you know what an ATS is? So if you don't really know it, then just click on the question mark on your screens. Yeah, I can see some few of you answering. Yeah. For those of you who just joined, you can just log on to menti.com and enter the code, so you'd be able to participate in all these questions. Great. So I'll tell you a little bit about the ATS. The ATS stands for Applicant Tracking System. So the applicant tracking system is essentially a software which scans your CV. So it scans your CV, it sorts your CV, it picks out the relevant keywords from your CV, it matches it against the job description of the job, and then it cherry picks the most relevant CVs and it presents it to the recruiter. Now, why do people use ATS these days? People use ATS these days because they receive like so many applications. Even if you look at LinkedIn for that matter, for every position, there would be maybe like applications ranging from 500 to 1,000 people. Now, how is a recruiter or an HR person able to go through all those CVs? It's just not possible. So the only way that they can, practically go through all of these CVs is to put all of these CVs through a software. So the software does the job of scanning and reading the CVs and picking the most appropriate CVs and presenting it to the recruiter. Now, the problem with using the ATS is that a lot of good candidates, they actually get rejected because the software rejects their CV. So if we have a complicated CV with a lot of photos, logos, what's going to happen is that the robot, which is the software, is actually not going to be able to read your CV because it's going to be quite complicated. We've all learned in school, computers have a 0 IQ. And that's exactly what it is. Softwares and all these robots which read your CVs, they don't understand anything complicated. They only understand words. And so if you have too many pictures, if you have too many fancy charts, your CV will get rejected. And if you're applying to a job where they use the ATS, most likely your CV will get rejected. Now, just to illustrate this point, I'm going to show you this CV. Again, you don't have to read the CV, just have a look at the CV. And my question for you is, do you think this CV will go through an ATS? So if you think yes, then click on the thumbs up. And if you think no, then click on the thumbs down. Okay, I can see quite a few of you joining in. Okay. Great. Great. I think, yeah, that's good. I can see a lot of you answering. And a majority of you think that it will not cross the ATS. And that's actually the right answer, which is, this CV, it looks really good. If somebody had sent this CV to me directly, I would have been impressed because it's very well presented and it's quite crisp and clear. The only problem is that it's too complicated for a software to read because it uses a lot of pictures. So for example, all the section headings is nothing but a picture and with some text on it, but the robot or the ATS is not going to be able to read this text, the section headings. It'll get confused, the robot, when it sees this photo. It's not going to be able to read the core skills because it's like an infographic. And it's going to get confused when it sees corporate law and 85% because a robot is not, trained to understand this information. So unfortunately, even though the CV, there was a lot of effort put into the CV, it's not going to get through an ATS. And let's say this candidate is the perfect person for the job. His CV is not even going to turn up in front of the recruiter's desk. So that's what we're trying to avoid as we build our CVs today. So how do you defeat a bot, which is how do you defeat the ATS? As I just mentioned, you don't want to have any fancy formats, charts, graphics, or tables. It's very important to keep your CV very simple. Second is use the right keywords. Now, again, when it comes to all these ATS and softwares, what they do is that they scan the CVs and they try and look for the right keywords in your CVs. So for example, let's say that I am a lawyer working for a really large law firm and I'm looking for a corporate lawyer. So I'm going to tell my HR or the recruiter, look for CVs with words like M&A, joint ventures, share purchase agreements, shareholders agreements. So the software is actually going to look for those keywords. And if those keywords are not there in your CV or in your resume, then you're going to either be, your CV is going to be either rejected or you will rank. I mean, it will probably not turn up before the recruiter. A second is, another point is your contact information. Try and avoid putting it in the header or the footer, which is, the area right at the top of the page, because that's something that sometimes ATS systems cannot read. And just to give you some background, we work a lot with softwares because Recruvia, which is the company which launched Resigo, we try and test various different softwares, and so we know what works and what doesn't when it comes to parsing resumes. Make sure that you use the right file types. I think this is something that most of you would anyways be doing, which is using Word or PDF documents. Use simple bullet points. Now, nowadays, sometimes I see in CVs, people use really fancy bullet points. For example, even on the screen, this arrow marks, it's not a good idea to use this for your CV, because what's going to happen is that, again, the robot is going to get confused. It only understands simple bullet points, which is, just that round dot. And that's what you need to use in your resumes. Again, font is very important. People tend to use all sorts of crazy fonts on their CVs. I would say stick to something very basic, such as Times New Roman, Arial, or Garamond, and make sure that you're using font size 11 or larger. Again, this is the same thing that I mentioned before. Don't use logos or pictures. Like, for example, sometimes some people tend to, let's say if they've worked for Apple, what they do is that they put the logo of Apple on their CV. Now, again, that's not a good, it looks good, but the problem is that the ATS is going to get confused and your CV is going to probably get rejected. Again, shading, what a lot of people tend to do is that, let's say that all the section headings, they tend to put it in a shade. So even if you looked at the previous CV that I just showed you, there was a box and they put, their experience on it, and they, the box had some shade. Now, the problem with shading, using shades in your CV is that it would turn out to be some sort of a picture in your CV, and the robot is again not going to read it. Now, one of the observations that you could potentially make is that if you looked at all the CVs from Harvard, Stanford, and Yale that I just showed you, none of them had any fancy photos. The only thing that those CVs had were words and a very simple format in a very organized way. So it actually fits the bill, and those CVs would definitely go through an ATS system. Definitely will not get rejected. So our aim today, as well as we build our CV, is to make sure that we have a very simple CV, and which is something that would pass through an ATS, and would also be eye-catching for the employer. Now, what are employers looking for? So this is something very simple, but anyways, I think it's very important to anyways discuss it, especially when it comes to law students. They're essentially looking for law students who possess basic qualities, which is common sense and intellectual ability, which is, the ability to analyze information. Now, a lot of times, and this happens to all of us when we work, we tend to forget our common sense. So try to keep that in mind when you do go for your internships. Use your common sense and ask questions. And how do you use your common sense? And you can use it by asking questions, making sure you understand instructions. So if you haven't understood any instructions, make sure that you ask the employer, exactly what they're looking for. Be curious. And if you display these qualities, then the employer is going to be impressed. Of course, this is basic. The second point, which is good research, communication, and writing skills. Now, these are qualities that you will have to develop throughout your life. So this is something that even I have to focus on today. I still have to work on my writing skills. I still work on my communication skills. So it's always good if you start this process right from the beginning at your law school itself. So one of the things that you could do is attend, take, sign up for courses on Coursera, Udemy, as well as Lawseco. Lawseco has a lot of interesting courses, and I personally heard a lot of my peers, even in Dubai, telling me that they've actually signed up for some of the Lawseco courses, and they've actually learned quite a lot. So I would say keep your curiosity alive. Always, always make sure that you're learning, and that's very important. And this goes not just for law students, but even for people like me. Like, I still have to sign up for writing courses. I still have to sign up for communication courses, because I know that I still, there's no end to improvement. So if you display these qualities, which is the willingness to learn and to improve yourself, then your employer is going to be very impressed. And of course, you need to make their job easier. And how do you make their job easier? You make their job easier by saving their time. So let's say they ask you to look up for a legislation. So and you find that legislation, you should probably go one step ahead, and maybe you can send them an article as well, which summarizes the legislation. Or you can even ask them things like, hey, is there something that you want me to see in this legislation? Is there any particular point you're researching on? I can do that. So the idea is you need to show that you're enthusiastic as well as proactive. So if you demonstrate these basic qualities, you can definitely outshine your peers when you go for an internship. And just to drive home the point, you don't have to be from a national law school or from a top tier law school to impress an employer. Once you get an internship, if you demonstrate these basic qualities, and if you're enthusiastic and proactive, no matter what, I do believe that your employer will get impressed by you. Now, grabbing an internship or jobs. Now, these are some useful resources that I've just collated. These are very basic, but I think it's important nevertheless to discuss them. One is LinkedIn. Now, LinkedIn is very, very important, I would say, for networking. And I've seen a lot of students get amazing opportunities via LinkedIn. And I can say the same thing for myself as well. Now, in LinkedIn as well, there's a way that you go about networking. It's important to, and it's important to follow certain protocols on LinkedIn. Now, one of the things, I can give you a personal example. So when I was moving from Mumbai to Dubai, I had to look for a job, and I decided that, okay, I'm going to use LinkedIn, because I was also applying for a lot of positions through job boards and on the LinkedIn website, and I really wasn't really getting a response. So I realized that, okay, I need to basically start networking. So what I started doing was that I started connecting with partners and lawyers from different law firms. And what I would do is that I would connect with them, and then I would send them a message saying that, hey, this is Priyasha. This is the experience that I've had at Trilegal, and here's my CV. I'm looking for an opportunity. Could you help me out? And I realized that that approach just wasn't working, because nobody was responding to me. And that was my first lesson, which is you need to break the ice before you ask something from somebody. So that was that's one thing that I realized when I even joined a law firm in Dubai, which is, so many people send you messages every day, which is, you're probably going to get maybe 5 to 10 messages every day with people sending you the same message, which is, hey, I'm looking for a job, can you help me out? Now, nobody has the time to respond to the messages. So what you need to do is you need to break the ice before you ask somebody something. So what you can do is you can connect with somebody, and then I would say the best approach is to start sharing your articles, start engaging with people in your, start engaging with articles as well on your LinkedIn feed, post comments. And what's going to happen is that that's going to make the person who you connected with notice you. And this is exactly what I did as well. I was essentially, I shared a few articles of mine. So I connected with a few more partners when I realized that, my approach wasn't working. And what I did was that I started sharing articles, and what I would do is I would just, after a little while, I would just send a message to the partner saying that, hey, I'm looking, I'm new to the UAE. I'm exploring opportunities. Could you let me know a little bit more about the UAE legal market? So I would set up coffee meetings, and that's how I started getting responses to my messages. And they also started noticing my articles. And one of the partners, he noticed one of my articles that I had just posted, and then he called me for an interview. So I would say LinkedIn is, being active on LinkedIn is super important for law students. In fact, even recently, I noticed there was a law student from Mumbai who was very active on LinkedIn, and she had connected with me a few months ago. I didn't even, remember her connecting with me, but I started noticing that she was posting a lot of posts on QLTS and, qualifying as a solicitor in the UK. And I noticed that she was quite enthusiastic about it. So I just sent her a message, and then I realized that yes, she has quite an interest in this field, and now she's actually working with me for QLTS Geek, which is my other venture, where we help people qualify as a solicitor in the UK. So like I said, LinkedIn is very important. So make sure that you pay a lot of attention to LinkedIn. There are a lot of recruiters and job boards as well today. And these are some very general ones that I've mentioned. LawSeco, of course, is an important portal because I myself, I've recruited at least 3 interns from LawSeco. So definitely you are going to get a lot of opportunities there. And they have a very good set of employers as well who employ from LawSeco. There's Bahura, there's Yellow Wire Consulting, which has specific portal for lawyers as well. You can also follow recruiters on LinkedIn, I would say. And these are some individuals who essentially post some relevant opportunities for law students and lawyers. Yeah, so these are just some basic resources that I just thought I would share. But I guess, like I said, important is LinkedIn. And that's the point that I wanted to drive home. Great. So now we've reached the stage where we are going to build your resume. So you can now go to resigo.com. So I'm going to give you a few seconds to do that, and I will also do that myself. So I'm going to, I want to make sure that all of you are with me. So I'm going to now start monitoring the chat box. And when you have any questions, and I'm going to address all these questions as well as I go through the resume, go through building a resume. So great. So what you can do is you can log on to resigo.com maybe on your browser. And you can click on create free resume. Let me just see a few quick questions. Yeah, so I'm actually going to cover all these questions as we build the resume, because you'll actually see in real time how these questions can be addressed. So I'm going to click on law student. So if all of you are with me, just if you can just type yes on your chat box, and then I can slowly move forward. So if you've logged on to resigo.com and have, okay, Mayank, thank you, Neha, thanks, Prateek, Anupam, Janvi, Angana, thank you, Miki Datta, thank you, Anvishka, Hitmi Shayoni. Great, perfect. Good to see so many of you participating, because I want, at the end of the session, I want all of you to have, your CVs ready with you, and it's not going to take time. It'll take, it's not going to take too much time, and it's just going to be 20 minutes and all of you will have a basic version of your CV ready. Perfect. So let's type, where did you study law? So I studied law at NLU Jodhpur, so I've mentioned that. I'm going to click on, here you can choose your degree. So I'm going to click BBA LLB because that's what I studied. And then I'm going to go to the next stage. So I'm going to select my areas of interest. For myself, I will choose corporate. I'll choose banking and finance. I'll press TMT, which is technology, media, and communication. And I will click employment. So I hope all of you would also do that along with me. So once you've selected your areas of interest, then you can move on to the next page. So we have a wide list of practice areas, so you can just click on what is of interest to you, and then we move on to the next page. Have you interned before? So I know a lot of you in your first years, you probably have not interned before, so you can click on no. But I think most of you present today would have done some internship, so you can click yes. And tell us about your internship history. Now, here you can type the law firm or the organization where you last interned. So I will click try legal. And I will, let's say, put November to December 2009. So it was a 1-month internship, and I will then click yes. Hope all of you have reached here with me. Here again, now if you can just click a yes, that would be great. So I'm going to give a few seconds to just reach here. There's a question, can we use other font size such as Times New Roman or Calibri? Yes, as long as it's a font size which is a sans serif or a surf font. So you can just Google that, but you can use Arial as well, Garamond. Perfect. Okay, thank you so much, Janvi, Angana, Shivanshu, Mehak. If you have interned under an independent advocate, then you can mention the advocate's name. So just mention litigation internship, or you can mention the name of the advocate who you interned with. Sorry, I think that was a private question to me, so I'm just repeating that. So I'm going to click on corporate for my recent internship, and I'm going to click on TMT. And actually, I'll click on banking and finance as well, and then I'll click on next. Okay, so this is the part where you might have to listen to me a little more carefully. What type of work did you carry out in your internship? So most of us would have done research. There's a question, should I mention the internship even if I don't have a certificate? Yes, you should. I mean, generally people don't ask for certificates. It's only if, it's only if, I mean, I've never really come across a situation where anyone's asked for a certificate. In fact, your employers are going to ask you questions, and if you can't answer them, then they will not be impressed. So the key thing is to mention your internships and to know that, and to make sure that you're able to answer whatever that you've questions on all the work that you did during your internship. Yes, Kanika. So I think it's asking your details. So maybe you have to log into Resigo if you've reached that stage. So if you haven't done an internship, you will reach the login page. So anyways, I'm going to quickly type all this work that I did in my internship. So I did research. I made notes. This is something that everybody works on. I worked on a due diligence. I drafted documents. Now, I'm also going to just click on attended court proceedings because I know a lot of you would have done litigation internships. So I'm just going to click that so that all of you can just have a look at what you need to add in your CV. And I will also just add, actually article, I'm just going to leave out. I'll add this. Now, if you look at your screens, now, wherever there's this orange button, you need to add extra information. So let's say I attended court proceedings. So you have to click on which courts you attended. So I'm going to click on Supreme Court, and I'm also going to click on Delhi High Court, and I will just press add. Then I'm going to click on the documents that I worked on. So this is important because if I'm applying to a corporate position, then I need to basically talk about the relevant documents that I've worked on. So I'm going to click on letters. I'll click on non-disclosure agreement. Since I worked on a corporate internship, I will mention shareholder agreement, share purchase agreement, joint venture agreement, board shareholder minutes, memorandum, articles of association. If you've done a banking internship, you can mention loan agreements. And then I will click add. I don't have to do anything for due diligence or notes because there's no orange button. For research, I will click here again. Now, so one of the things that we are going to do is we're going to add a search button here because we know that there are so many bare acts. It's a bit difficult to search for it like this on the screen. But since I did a corporate internship, I'm just going to click on the basic acts. So Companies Act, Partnership Act, Contract Act, and I will add, let's say, Banking Regulation Act because I did banking work as well. And I will add it here. So this is how you fill up your work experience details. And I'm going to give you a few seconds just to complete this. Question, can I mention the virtual internships? Yes, you can mention virtual internships. Everybody knows that it's COVID times. It's not possible to have a physical internship. So you can definitely mention virtual internships. Some of the international law firms have been offering very interesting virtual internships, and there's no harm mentioning that. Should we put a photograph as well on the resume? It depends, and I'm going to answer that as we later in today's workshop. And I'm also going to, Abhishek, I'm also going to answer your question as we move on past the login page, because we'll actually then get to see your CV. So if you've all completed this section, just click yes, because we're now going to register. So as soon as you're done registering, I just want you to, let me know yes. So I'm going to log in with Gmail. And I will, yeah. So once you've logged in, if you can just click on yes. I will give you a few seconds to log in because I know it takes some time. So just give me, I'm going to give you about 5 to 10 seconds. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, thank you so much, Ramanuj. Sorry about that. Perfect. So if you've logged in, if you can just click on yes. I've seen a few yeses from Ahan and Mehat, but I want to see some more. So because I want to make sure that all of you are with me today. So if you've logged in and you've reached the dashboard, just, yeah, just click yes. Thanks, Kanika, Diksha, AB. I want to say a few more because I need to make sure that all of you are with me as we build our CVs together. Angana, thank you. Shruti, thank you. Mayank, Hetvi, thanks. Rahul. This is an important step. We're going to cover some really important points right now as we work on our work experience section. Shivanshu, Aditya, Garama, thank you. Vanshika, thank you. So a few more yeses, and then I'm gonna move on. Like I said, this is the most important part where we quickly discuss how to structure your CV. Asmita, thank you. Janvi, thank you. Great, Amresh, thank you. So we've reached the dashboard, and this is where you would have all your resumes stored. And I've created quite a few resumes. So this is my latest resume, which is created on 30th July. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to edit it. So I'll click on edit. And I'm going to quickly add my phone number. Okay. So I'm adding this because I'm putting the country code because it's always good to mention country code, because especially if you're applying for international positions, then you need to make sure you have your country code. Also, even employers in India would like to see country code because you're dealing with a lot of international clients. So anytime you're mentioning your phone, you need to make sure you mention country code. I'm going to put a random address. To be honest, nowadays everybody uses email, so you don't need to put that many details in your address section. And I'm going to save it. So if you notice on your right hand side, your CV is getting updated real time. So that's one of the interesting features of this application. I'm going to quickly edit my education section as well. Hold on, I'm just going to cancel my WhatsApp. And then I'm going to add the duration. And I'll add Jodhpur here. I'm just going to remove this because there'll be a repetition otherwise. And I saved it. So if you see, it's my education section has gotten saved on the right-hand panel. Now, I'm going to now work on the work experience section, which is an important part of the CV. I will just add the city here, which is Mumbai. And I'm going to look at, and I'm now going to edit this. So it's very important to tailor your CV according to the job that you're applying for. So let's say I've interned at Trilegal now, and I've worked for corporate banking and technology laws. And I'm now applying to, let's say, Cyril Amacha and Mangaldas for a job. Now, if I'm applying to the corporate team of Amacha and Mangaldas, then I need to make sure that my CV reflects a lot of keywords that the corporate partner wants to see. So I'm applying to the corporate role. So I'm just going to make a few changes here, which is I'll put corporate first, then banking and finance, and technology and communications. So this is a minor edit. Then I will mention assisted in researching and drafting an article on. Here, I will try and add some more details. So let's say that I worked on mergers and acquisitions, merger and acquisitions in India. So this is relevant for a corporate job. So I will mention a very relevant article that I've actually worked on. This is actually not relevant. So if I were applying to civil amateur for a corporate job, I might just remove this, but I'm keeping this here because I know a lot of you would have done maybe some litigation internship. So I just want to show that this is how it appears in your CV when you click all the quotes that you've worked with. But for the purpose of this CV, I'm going to delete it now because it's irrelevant for a corporate job. And then this is the part which talks about all the documents that I've worked on. So all these documents, shareholder agreement, share purchase agreement, joint venture agreements, these are all relevant for a corporate job. And so I'm going to leave it here. And this is something that's going to catch the attention of the employer. So when the partner sees the CV, he's actually going to, he's going to be interested, and he will then ask me, he'll probably call me for an interview, and then he's going to ask me questions on what work I did with respect to all these questions. I mean, all these documents. Due diligence is very relevant. So it's a good point to add in your corporate CV. And then prepared notes and legal memoranda on. Now, here is where you need to add some more details because, of course, it's hard for us to predict what are the notes that you've worked on. So here, what I'll do is I will add director liability under Companies Act because that's a very interesting area for corporate lawyers. It's a question that we get asked a lot from foreign clients. So it's a good point to add in your CV if you've done some work here. And then I will also just mention enforceability of non-compete clauses in commercial contracts. So this is just like, let's say, 2 notes that I prepared. So I'm just going to leave it like that. And the last point is research. Now, if you've done research on all these various legislations, it's a good idea to add the sections. So let's say that I will add sections 8, 221 and 327. These are just random sections, but what's going to happen is that it's always good to add details in your CV. So let's say that I send this CV to an employer. He will have a look at my work experience, and then he will ask me, okay, Priyasha, tell me a little bit about your research on Section 27 of the Indian Contract Act. And so this is going to be a conversation starter, and I can then give him a little bit of details about what I worked on, for what research I did with respect to the Indian Contract Act. So I'm going to save this, and it gets automatically saved in real time here on the right hand screen. Now, if I want to add an experience, I can still do that. So under work experience, you can click on add experience. I'm going to click Luthra, and then I will mention that, let's say I did an internship in July. So I can quickly fill up these details. I will mention corporate, and then I can just quickly mention due diligence, and I'll quickly mention a few simple documents. Add experience, and here you go. You can see on the right side, I quickly now have another work experience on my CV. So I think the best part is that I don't have to focus on the formatting. I'm only now working on the content of the CV. One of the things that you can actually notice in the preview is that, it's a very simple CV. It's quite similar to all the CVs that you saw at the beginning of the presentation, which is the recommended resumes of Harvard Law School, Stanford Law School, and Yale Law School. We're only focusing on education, work experience, and in a very simple format that will actually work for the ATS. So this CV is so simple that the ATS will actually be able to understand the CV. It will pick the right keywords, and most likely my CV, I mean, there's no doubt about it, but my CV would get scanned by the software, and the robot is actually going to be able to read my CV. Now, so I've added education, I've added work experience, and these are the different areas that I can add. So I'm going to now start addressing some of the questions. I worked with the company secretary for 6 months. Does that internship also add value? Yes, definitely. Like I said, I'm going to keep using this word. So relevance is what you need to be focusing on. So if you're applying for a corporate position and you've worked for a company secretary for 6 months, that's very valuable experience. There's a lot of important skills that you pick up from a company secretary. You learn how to draft minutes of the meeting, you learn compliance. So it's very important experience, and the employer would be impressed that you've actually done an internship in with the company secretary. I'm going to read this question from Abhishek. I would like you to please tell us in what manner we should incorporate the experience in our resume that we have learned through Resigo courses. What I have realized is that lawyers or firms give importance to the practical work done on real projects rather than what you learned through an online course or diploma. Well, let me answer the first question, which is if you want to add any course that you did, what I would do is I would add it to the certification section. So let's say that I did a course on legal drafting, okay, from Resigo. So I would just mention it here, and then I would add, let's say 2009, and I would add this here. So if you can see on the right hand side of the screen, it gets reflected. Now, like I mentioned before, again, what employers are looking for is relevant experience and enthusiasm. So if you've done a lot of online courses, what it shows is that this person actually has taken the initiative to go beyond their law school curriculum and taken an additional course. So for example, I can give you a quick example there. I know another peer of mine, he had sent me his CV, and I do a lot of work with technology laws as well. And he had done a lot of courses on technology law, especially online certifications. He had done, let's say, a blockchain and AI course from Oxford University. He had also done a technology course from Resigo, and he had mentioned all of that in his CV. And he had sent me a very nice cover letter as well. And that actually picked my attention because I was like, okay, he's not just focused on his law school curriculum, but he's also gone beyond that, and he's taken the effort to take these additional courses. So you need to look at. So I think that sort of gave him like an upper hand. So your CV needs to be balanced. You need to have, let's say, of course, internships are important, which is practical experience. But if you've done something above and beyond that, you should show it to the employer. You need to show that you're a proactive person who actually is really excited to learn new things. So I definitely think that your certification section plays an important role. And that's something that I personally look at as well.
Priyasha,
So
I'll just take a moment to
sure.
clarify something. Okay, so we have noticed something very interesting. So imagine that what happens is that we teach you a lot of practical skills that normally a law student is not expected to know. Okay, like for example, let's say we teach you how to draft a lot of commercial contracts that people have never seen. Like if you are a fourth year student, maybe in a law firm, they don't expect that you know all the clauses of a shareholder agreement. Okay. But if you have done our course, you will be knowing, or you will know, what let's say an IP, a patent licensing agreement looks like, and you will know the clauses, and you will have knowledge about that. Now, what happens is that when you go for an interview or you are in an internship, you you do it and they're like, wow, how do you know these things? It's a very good impression. But what happens is, now if you say that, where did you learn this, and if you say it's from a Resigo course, then people know that it's really easy to learn this from Resigo course. Anybody who does a course more or less knows it. Okay, so then it kind of brings down the charm of the fact that you know all these things. So you just say what we say is that don't say anything about law school courses. Say I have an interest, so I know this. Okay, and it works. We have seen this working better in interviews. So you don't always have to go and say, hey, I have done a law school course. Now, what happens with our students is that they're so proud of something they have learned, and the course they have done. They know it was hard work, and they go and bombard saying, look, I have done a law school course. Look, I have done a law school course. That is not always good because let's say you know the difference between a tag along and a drag along clause, and if you're a third year law student, most lawyers will find it really good. Okay, that wow, how do you know this? But that is because they are comparing their experience of going to law school with yours, right? And they're like, when I was a third year law student, I didn't know this. That's really awesome. But if you tell them, oh, I learned it from a law school course, probably if they know about us, even then they will think one way to think of it, okay, you have taken an initiative and gone and learned stuff, which is great. But there are some people who will say, oh, law school course, that's how you know. Okay, fine. It's not a big deal then. So it is a big deal that you know these things, and you don't tell people necessarily that you know that you've done a law school course. It don't matter. You should mention it in your CV. I'm not saying don't mention it in your CV, but do not harp on that fact. And if people ask you how did you learn it, you should say I have an interest in this. I have been trying to learn. That's how I learned, which is not a lie anyway. Okay, it's not like you're, but that's enough for most people. They're like, oh, you have interest, you've learned, so that's very good. That's a more politically correct, not politically correct, but it's like a more strategically correct answer. Okay, so just wanted, sorry for taking a couple of minutes
Yeah.
for this.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, like I said, when you actually intern at an organization, that's when people will actually get to know, they will see the output of all your courses that you've done. So, yeah, as Ramanuj mentioned, yes, that's when, the effect of all the courses that you've taken will actually be seen when you're actually interning at an organization and you're applying all that you've learned practically. Another interesting question is, I'm writing articles for college magazines and newsletters. Can I add it in the publication section, or is it limited to research papers? So I think you do have a little bit of a leeway here. So let's say that you don't have a publication with, let's say, the Journal of Corporate Law. You can still add a few articles. So let's say that you worked on an article on, let's say, regulatory framework for banking in India, and it was published in a newsletter. You can just mention, you can probably paste the link to that newsletter here, and you can mention the year as well. Now, again, this should be relevant to the job that you're applying for. So let's say you're applying to a banking position, then you should mention this article because it's relevant. And you actually know a little bit of the law. So you need to show that you actually have knowledge with the banking laws. And then you can mention, let's say this is Amity Law School newsletter. And you can add a link here. Of course, if you've had actual publications, that would be more important than this, and you can even add that. So let's say it's the Journal of Corporate Law and it's 2010. So I would actually add this. So since this is actually published in a publication, then this is actually a little more important. So what I'll do is I'll drag it and I'll put it front here. So, that's more important. So I put it as point number 1. And then my second article which is the newsletter, is point number 2. Should we mention the webinars we attended during lockdown? Again, a good question. It depends. So generally, CV should be 2 pages. And if you don't have too much of information, if you have a lot of irrelevant information, what I would do is I would remove the irrelevant information and put the relevant information. So let's say that let me go to the certification section. So let's say that I attended a webinar on global M&A, and it was organized by Baker McKenzie, which is a big law firm. Then I would actually mention it because I'm sending my CV to a corporate partner, and he sees that I've actually attended a webinar on M&A by an international law firm. So he could potentially be impressed because he would be like, okay, so she has She has an interest in M&A. She has attended webinars, which is relevant to the job. Similarly, if I'm applying to a litigation, litigation position, and then let's say that I've attended a webinar on litigation in India. This is a very general topic, but it was organized by, let's say, the speaker was, Mr. Gopal Subramaniam. So this actually might be interesting if I send it to another litigation lawyer, because he might be interested and he might be, he might just ask me, okay, what did you guys cover in this webinar? Because it shows that, okay, fine, Priyasha is interested in litigation. She's attended webinars on litigation, and it will catch the attention of the partner who's recruiting. Can we mention MOOCs? I think this is again online courses, right? That's what I understand. MOOCs. Yeah, you can again mention MOOCs here in your certifications if it's relevant to the job. So if you're applying to a banking position and you've done a course on drafting loan agreements, then why not? You should mention it. District High Court trip, she's not on the list. That's a very good point. We definitely add more courts and tribunals to our list. So if you have any suggestions or additional features that you think you want to see in this app, then please send us an email at hello@resigo.com, and we will definitely incorporate it, because our idea is to improve this product. And so we really want to see some interesting feedback. I'm just going to see some of the more recent questions. If any person has corporate experience prior to 3-year law, will it be counted in resume even if prior experience is not related to law? Okay, that's a very good question. I think if you have prior experience, it's super relevant, because it shows that you actually know how to work at an office and you have that practical experience. So you would have those basic skills such as professionalism, responsibility, and these are things that you learn when you actually work. So let's say that you didn't really work at a corporate law firm, or you worked at a company. So let me add a company. So let's say that you worked for Reliance Telecommunications. What you can do is you can always add relevant work experience description. So, oops. Okay, so this might be a little, because this is a little legal, so I'm just gonna keep it simple here, and I'm gonna amend the. Okay, so I think this is something that if you're an experienced person, then you would have to click the experience workflow, because this was the law student workflow. But you can change the designation here. So let's say that you were working for the procurement team, okay, or you were a manager. You can mention that manager. Then you can add the city here, and then what you can do is here is where you can amend it. So just say that I primarily worked in the, let's say, finance department, okay? So let's say that you worked for the accounting department. So you can just say, you can try and add relevant information such as I reviewed the loan documents, or reviewed the loan documents and liaised with the banks for payments or something like that, or negotiated negotiated loan agreements, or negotiated restructuring of loan. Now, these are all, relevant information, which is going to be relevant even in your law job. So even if you don't have legal experience, all of this would actually help you in your law firm job. So make sure that you cherry pick the information from your non-law work, which is suitable, which is going to be relevant for a law firm. So you don't have to mention everything what you did. Like, for example, you would have done a lot of accounting. You can mention that in brief, but focus on the stuff that's more relevant to law. Could you highlight key points for a cover letter? So this is, again, something that we've gotten a lot of feedback, and we will definitely incorporate another sort of a feature on our platform where you can actually build, hopefully, a cover letter. But I think the common mistakes in the cover letter is that people use a very standard format and they don't tailor it for the job. So let's say that if somebody is writing an email to me, they will probably just say that, dear ma'am, please see attached my CV. I'm looking for a job, you need to tell me a little bit more about yourself in the email. So just say that, show that you've done some research about the firm, show that that you have relevant experience for the firm. Tell me a little bit more about yourself in your cover letter and personalize it. So that is the key point for cover letters. There is no option to keep the location as work from home or virtual. In this case, do we keep the city tab blank or add the city where the particular firm company is located? Let me just quickly check that. That's a good question. Maybe here you can put it in brackets, virtual internship. But I mean, it's good to put the city as well. So I would actually do this. I would put the city because it shows that, because let's say that I've worked for Trilegal Mumbai, then and I'm just sending my CV to Amar Chand. They might just ask you, okay, which partner did you work with? So I would probably just put here, I would put virtual intern. So this is where I would change my designation and I would save it as virtual intern. Do we need to mention minimum salary expectation? No, not in your CV. That's something nobody mentions in their CV. I know, AB, you also asked a question on photo. Now, that's a good question again. Now, if you're applying for a specific position for a small law firm where you know that they're not going to use an ATS, and you've heard from people that the small law firm sort of they like somebody to use a photo, then you can put your photo. Because I do know that certain law firms, they ask you for a photo on your CV, so you can definitely put that. But in general, let's say if you're applying to an international law firm, you never put your photo. Also, for a lot of top tier law firms, you don't really put your photo. So you need to do a little bit of research before you send in your CV. Like, for example, in the UAE, there is a trend of putting in the photo for especially smaller law firms. But for international law firms, it's looked down upon. So if you put your photo, they're most likely going to reject you. Also, bear in mind, if you're applying for a mass job application, so let's say that you go to imjobs.com and apply for a position, or if you're applying for LinkedIn jobs where you know that more than 1,000 people are applying for the position, then try to avoid putting your photo because they are going to most likely use an ATS. So as I mentioned earlier in my presentation, when you have photos in your CV, the ATS might get confused. And so, uh, it's better to avoid putting your photos when you're doing mass applications. A question from Mohammed: what is rare contextual recruitment system that some law firms use? I'm sorry, but I actually don't know what that is. I've never heard of that, but I will definitely look that up. Let me see a few more questions. What are internship opportunities for 3-year law students versus? I think it's the same. There's no difference.
Priyasha, should I answer that question on rare contextual
Yeah, yeah,
recruitment?
sure. I mean, if you
Okay,
know
sure.
it,
So,
then
yeah,
definitely.
sure. I think only some UK law firms have started using it. Basically, the idea is that by collecting big data, you can actually find somebody who's really suitable for a particular job, and that's the idea. And it's the idea is that it's something like Google search. When there are, let's say you have how to write a good resume, there will be like thousands and thousands of articles on the internet on that, but Google from that huge database have a way to select, and show you like 10 results in the first page, right? So they are applying a lot of factors to kind of refine and decide what would be relevant for you. And this also is something that gets trained over time. So let's say they hire somebody, and depending on the results, next time the software will upgrade itself. So it's a big data AI solution. But honestly speaking, what is relevant here, you probably want to know that, okay, how do I get past this, or how do I get selected by the system? The answer is that you become very suitable for that job. That's all. You become very suitable for that job by developing skills, knowledge, interest. Uh, that's the way, right? So, okay, I hope that
Yeah.
helps.
Yeah, thanks, Ramnoj, for pitching in. That's very interesting to know. I'd love to research more about that. Okay, so one of the things that I mentioned is that it's always good to have different versions of your CVs depending on the job that you're applying to. So let's say that for this job, I'm applying to, let's say, Trilegal. So I can save it as Trilegal on Resigo. And if I want to make another CV for, let's say I'm applying to DSK Legal separately, and I'm basically applying for their banking team. So I have now a copy of the resume, and I can just click here, and I can just save it as, let's say, I'll just save it as DSK Legal. So I can save different versions of of my resume on Resigo, and I can keep amending this. So I will definitely amend all my work experience to make it a little more banking and finance related. And I can obviously, I mean, I can also download my CV. So all I have to do is I have to click this, and I can download it here. So that's one feature that we wanted to make sure that all of you have, because it's so important to tailor your CV. How to answer questions like why law, why this firm in an interview? This is a question from Muhammad. I think it's important to be honest here. So if there's a reason why you chose law, then just, you know, I think it's an important question that people might ask you in your interview. So just try and think about the reason why you took law and mention it. Why this firm? Why this firm? How do you answer that question? You need to research about the firm, and you need to understand, try and speak to somebody who's probably worked there, or try and read articles about what this firm is good at, and try to do research about the firm. And that's how you will be able to answer this question.
Uh, just would like to add, if you want to answer this question very well as to why you are choosing a certain firm, and it's like you should research on all the firms which are adjacent in the same market or similar size or works for the similar kind of clients. You need to learn about all of them, and then you will be able to start noticing the difference, because you can only justify your answer based on the differences with other law firms. So for example, you can say that, uh, just to give you an example, right? So for example, if it is Trilegal really takes pride in having a lockstep, partnership model. JSA takes a lot of pride in the fact that uh, a partner cannot hire their own or another partner's family members. Okay, it's just not allowed by their rules. You have to hire somebody who's unrelated. If there are two people get married, then one has to leave the firm. So it's like that, and there are every farm has something unique about them, their culture. Now, if you start comparing one farm with another, you'll be able to notice the differences even better. That so for example, I mean that is the one great way to do it. The other great way to see is that what are the major matters they have done, what are the major cases they are arguing. Do they promote partners fast? There are some firms which promotes partners to people faster, to partnership, others don't. So and I think work culture. So basically, when you compare one firm with another, you are able to answer that question much better. So then you can say, there are other firms which does this, but your firm do it this way, which I like, and that I think always hits home much better than just when you don't use any comparison. Does that make sense, Priyasha?
Yeah, no, I think that, yeah, no, those are some valid points that you covered out there. I mean, it all depends on, where you worked and all of that. So definitely good points. I was just having a look at another question from Param, which is with respect to very basic resume formats where you find mention of aim and objective to approach a particular law firm to work under a particular senior, how would you put forward that with the resume we're currently working on? I think that's something that you would essentially cover in your cover letter. So
And not in the resume.
yeah, it would not really be specifically mentioned in your resume because your resume is going to be something very basic. It's going to be focused on your education, your work
How it will
experience.
convey is through how closely it is connected with, whatever you write is connected with what the partner does or what the law firm does, right? So if you're applying, for example, with a partner who does a lot of private equity work, then your entire CV should reflect things which are relevant for private equity work and nothing else. And but if you're applying with, say, somebody who's known for doing PE work as well as M&A, does VC also, then you might want to have the CV accordingly. So I think in the CV you do not write that, hey, I want to work with this kind of person, but there's no point. Like your CV shows basically the experiences you write, everything. I mean, what Priyasha already said. But I think that's the most important factor. You cater to the person in everything you write in your CV,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, like again, another example for moot court as well. If I've done a corporate law moot court, then it's going to be super relevant. Even if I've only been a participant, I will still mention it because I'm selling it to a corporate partner. So I will just mention that in my CV because he will then know that, okay, fine, I have done things which are aligned with the job that I'm
It's a
applying for.
consistent track record, right? It's a consistent
Yeah,
track record of
yeah,
interest.
yeah, exactly. So
The
I
funny
think,
thing is that people are really tired of this thing. Like, let's say there's a sports lawyer opening, right? And then everybody will come and say, "Oh, all my life I've been interested in sports law." But how does it show? Like, you saying it is not enough. Does your
mhm.
track record show it somewhere? Like, have you been participating in sports law moods? Have you participated in essay contests about sports law? Have you written some articles? Have you blogged? Have you attended events about sports law? And when you don't have that, then it's a big problem. You can claim as much as you want that, I am totally interested in sports law, but your CV doesn't show that, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's so important. Yeah, because you need to show a consistent. You need to show that throughout your life you've been actually doing stuff relevant for sports law. So that's very important. Because otherwise, if you haven't, then it like for example with this CV, I wouldn't send it to an NGO because an NGO would be like, why is it's so corporate law based, but if I've done a moot on, let's say, Stetson, which I think is related to environment law, then I would actually just mention it here. So it's very important for everything in your CV to be aligned. There's an important question by Muhammad. Can we underline the main points such as education, work experience, etc. in the CV? I would say you can definitely bold certain things in your CV. So, for example, let's say in trilegal, I worked on shareholder agreements. I want to highlight certain things, and maybe I could just,
Yeah, but it may not be a great idea also. I mean, it depends really. I will not be. I would say that write very few things and make it so concise that whatever is worth be making bold is only there. So there is nothing else.
yeah,
That you
yeah.
need to separately bold
Yeah,
perhaps.
I would. The only things that I have ever put bold on my CVs are client names, and that is when you're an experienced
Yeah.
lawyer.
That's a
So,
uniform formatting standard, so that's fine.
yeah,
So
yeah. So
if
client
you're
names are
highlighting
good.
each, yeah, if you're going to make put every client name in bold, then it is totally like
Yeah.
That's good.
But I wouldn't underline like work experience or education because I don't want to complicate the format of my CV. So, like I wouldn't specifically put underlines under each of the section headings. If you're sending resume in an email, do we need to send in PDF or Word format? Generally, people send it in PDF format. Word format is generally not used if you're using an email, unless a recruiter specifically asks you for a Word format. So generally, it's a PDF format that people send on email.
There's one thing I want to mention here. When
Yeah,
you are putting things in your CV, keep in mind that this CV will be used if you are shortlisted for interview as what you are going to get asked. So the things you plant in the CV, like if you should be planting questions for the interview into the CV, because for example, can you like yeah, just thanks. That's so. For here, for example, if you said that assisted in researching and drafting an article on marginal acquisition in India, very quite certain that you will be asked, okay, what was the article?
yeah,
Then they'll be like, okay, what was what were your arguments in the article, and then they'll want to know. People always ask you questions from your CV. Then they'll be like, okay, you have assisted in drafting, reviewing, and proofreading. Okay, just if you don't scroll, just hold on for a second. Where did I lose it?
yeah.
And
It's the
proofreading
same.
documents, including letters, non-disclosure agreements. So they'll be like letters. What letter did you draft? Okay,
Yeah, they
and
will ask you.
correct. And then if you have written non-disclosure agreement, they might ask you, okay, what are the major clauses that you need to pay attention to in a non-disclosure agreement. So they will pick up things from your CV and ask you. That is almost certain. So you might there are questions you are really in a good place to answer. There are questions you don't know how to answer, right? So make sure that you plant the right things into your CV for later, because once you're shortlisted, your interview, most of the time, a lot of it is like around your CV.
Yeah, yeah. I think whatever that you mentioned in the CV, you need to know. You need to do your research. You need to prepare before your interview. So whatever that you mentioned, be sure that they will ask you questions on
Yeah,
that. So
and I
if
will,
it,
I will, I will tell you one step forward. Imagine what is
Mhm,
your perfect
mhm.
interview, right? What questions are you answering? If those questions come, you will hit it out of the park. And there are questions you don't want to answer. You don't do so well with those questions, right? So it may so happen that you don't know the FEMA regulations very well, but you know how, like something else very well. So you do not write, even if you've done FEMA work, then you don't want to write it, because if you are asked questions, you will know exactly what is written, but you may not know the other stuff around that, which would be a problem, right? So I would say that just imagine your perfect interview. What questions would be there that you will be really doing super well with those questions? Make sure those questions are planted in the CV by what you write here, right? So you can invoke a question by writing something in your CV, essentially. So you can predict what will happen in your interview if you write the right things in your CV.
Yeah, yeah, very valid points. Some other important questions. Can you include, like, question from Shiva? Can you include anything excluding legal work in the CV? I think you can, because I've spoken to a lot of recruiters, and what they've basically said is that sometimes partners like to see something which is outside work as well. So let's say an interest in activities. Maybe let's say that if I have an interesting hobby, okay, this is not exactly an interesting hobby, but this could be an icebreaker, or so maybe I can just add it as like a point, and or maybe just say that let's say I
I don't know how much
participated.
this works in India. I have heard this works. This is very important in the UK, because they will not see you as a well-rounded person unless you have something like this.
Yeah, but I mean, I spoke to a few recruiters in India as well, and they mentioned that it's good to add personal interests. So let's say if you have something interesting, very unique, it's good. It's a good point to add. You might just catch the attention of the recruiter. Can you put URL of your blogs on your resume? Yes, you can. I've done that in the past quite a lot. I've also Can you mention published articles on iPleader's blog? Yes, you can. Like I said, if it's relevant and it'll show the employer that you've throughout your law student stint, you've been consistent and you've actually submitted articles relevant to the job. How do I include the drafting exercises which I have worked on during the Law Seco course? Can I put it in my
Rahul,
Google Drive?
you can reach out to the placement office. They'll guide you. Okay, so we have someone. We have a 6 people team in our placement office. They will help you. So just reach out to them. They'll guide you on how to do it. Drafting exercises, if you include, it has to be done very carefully, and they'll help you.
Yeah, I would say you can use this when you're just sending an application to a specific partner. So let's say that you've met a particular partner somewhere at a conference, and he says, okay, why don't you send me a CV? And then you can ask that partner, can I also send you some of the articles that I've drafted? Can I send you some drafting work that I've done? And if the partner says, yeah, sure, then you can send it. Because that's happened to me a couple of times as well, where somebody has actually sent me their articles or their work that they've done, but they've specifically asked me beforehand, and then they've sent it.
Yeah, it has happened when I was applying for internships many years back, that I will mention some research papers and articles I have written, and they'll say, please send it, please send this to us. And then they will see that, and then they'll confirm that. Quite a few things.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. So I think we've covered most of the questions today, and we're almost done with our timing. But I see one more question. I'll probably address that. I'm a 3-year LLB student with no work experience, no good work experience, and 0 publications. Could you suggest me some tips to make my CV attractive enough to get an internship in a good corporate law firm? Yeah, that's fine. Like I said, one thing that you can do is, if you do have some work experience, try and just focus on the relevant experience in your work experience section. And you can also try and add more things to your resume. So for example, this is where you can actually add all the webinars or the certifications or online courses that you've done. So this is the part where you can actually show the employer that you've actually done additional things outside your course curriculum.
So if I can add something here, Priyasha, what happens is that the competition is so difficult these days that you are not going to, you can write everything, but unless if you have, why do you have 0 publications? Publish a few nice articles in the next 2 weeks, right? And then send it. So if I am, for example, you need to work. It's not like, oh, I sent a great CV, beautiful CV, so I'll get an internship. Okay, it is not working like that now anymore. It used to work like that even when I was a student, maybe, but not anymore. What you need to do is, if you, for example, if you decide that, okay, I want to do an internship at ELP Bombay or whatever, right? These are the 5 firms which I'm going to target. You need to work on it for the next 3 months. So that 3 months will include, networking. It will include you working on your CV, sure, but it will also include you maybe writing. So if you decide that, okay, I want to work in the TMT team or a media law team or whatever, you decide, you'll have to write articles, you have to publish, you'll have to learn stuff, you have to maybe attend those webinars and build some track record in the next 3 months and then apply. Because if you say that, how will I get it without doing all this work? I don't know. Honestly, I don't think Priyasha also has a solution for that, no matter how nice you make your CV look, right?
Yeah. I mean, like Raman said, you can also, publication is something that you can always do it yourself as well. You can just write a few blogs. So you can start that process now. Or you can even publish it on LinkedIn, like I mentioned, right? Like some of my practical experiences, I've mentioned it on LinkedIn. So these are the simple things, tools that you have these days to actually
publishing on
showcase your
LinkedIn,
work.
though, people may not be taking it very seriously. Generally, if you publish an article on LinkedIn, which is agreed, if you share it as a networking tool, is fine. But I don't know, do you think it'll be okay to put it on CV? Wouldn't people wonder, why couldn't you publish it somewhere else? Why on LinkedIn?
Yeah, I mean, no, definitely. But like I said, if you don't have anything, that's the next best thing to do.
Yeah,
but
sure.
otherwise, try and send it to a blog like iPleaders, or send it to,
Live
I don't
law.
know. Yeah, Live Blog, there's Loctopus, all of these different portals. Should we add the percentage of all semesters? I would say no, just add your overall CGPA. But if
If it is
you
really high or something, you can show.
yeah, I mean, like, maybe if you want to show that you've actually improved over the years and you've increased your percentage, then maybe you can add your semester grades, but it will complicate your CV, I think.
Yeah, it'll come.
In which section should we mention diploma courses? I would add it to the certification section. Ramanuj, do you have any thoughts there? I wouldn't
Yeah,
put it.
sure. Certifications include diploma, whatever it is.
Yeah, I would not put it under education section. Can we get a certificate for this? I think, yeah, I mean, I think there's a certificate for this webinar.
Yeah, if you want a certificate, you write a mail to, I'll share an email ID with you, and you write a mail to her, and she'll.
How do we calculate our CGPA? I think that every university has its own style of calculating the percentage. Can we attach a work portfolio? If yes, should the link to the work portfolio be directed through the CV, or should I attach a separate zip file folder? Well, same answer. You generally don't attach a work portfolio unless somebody has asked you. So if somebody asks you, then you can send it, or you can offer the person saying that I have a work portfolio. Can I send it to you? And this is a direct conversation, then you can send it. Great. I think we've covered.
We can wrap up maybe.
Yeah, we can wrap up. So, well, I hope you guys found this workshop useful. And if you have any suggestions or features that you think you want to add in, that you think we need to add on this application, we can definitely do that, because we are constantly trying to improve this the features here. So we would definitely appreciate any of your feedback or suggestions. We will also be conducting another session for experienced lawyers, and that's our next round of webinars. So hopefully, Ramanuj, I'll meet you again for another webinar for experienced lawyers. So yeah, I mean, thanks so much, guys, for your participation. Follow Resigo on LinkedIn, because that's where we keep putting up all our updates. We are going to, like I said, keep adding interesting features, and hopefully we would also add another feature for you to apply to jobs. For, let's say, if you want to apply to Resigo, hopefully we can add that here as well on our platform. So once you've created your CV, you can then apply for positions, and that's what we're aiming for in terms of the next stage. Great. Thank you so much, guys, for joining in, and thank you, Ramanuj, for having us again.
Yeah, thank you, Priyasha, for making time for this, and definitely looking forward to hosting you again on more things. And whoever wants certificate, please reach out to bhavna@lawseco.in, and it will be taken care of. Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Yep. Bye.
Bye.